Hey everybody, welcome back for Proverbs 18, 13 through 24. I am glad you're here. If you've got any questions or comments, if you could leave those in the comment section below, I would appreciate it, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Any likes and shares are also appreciated. Lets other people know that we're out here. And so those are greatly appreciated. So let's go ahead and get started. Proverbs 18, verse 13. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. So basically, if you start talking before you listen, you're projecting yourself as a fool and giving yourself or bringing shame upon yourself. So we need to always remember to hear before we talk. Make listening our priority and not talking. And we've talked about several times throughout Proverbs about how wisdom actually causes you to be quieter and talk less, and so it makes it easier to listen first. And we should always listen before trying to give an opinion or share some wisdom, because our wisdom may not be wisdom at all if we don't hear out a situation before we jump into it. Verse 14, and a man's spirit will endure sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear? So basically your spirit, your soul, your emotional being, whatever you want to call that, will endure sickness. So physical sickness will come and go, and a positive spirit will kind of carry you through that, but a crushed spirit who can bear? So if you get in a situation where your spirit is damaged or hurting, that will have a much more permanent and much more damaging effect on your even on your physical body. So the kind of the moral of this verse is to protect your spirit, protect. I think we all know kind of what our push points are and what we need to be looking out for. So protect that as best you can, because if once your spirit is crushed, it has a more significant bearing on who you are and who you become. So protect that. Verse 15, an intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. So again, we've talked about several times how the intelligent and the wise seek out more knowledge. They don't get to a point and say, "Oh, well, I've learned enough." They constantly seek out knowledge. They constantly seek out growth. And again, you have the choice as to which camp you put yourself in. So if you choose to be wise, you will continue to seek knowledge and continue to seek growth. If you choose to be a fool, you will stop seeking knowledge and stop seeking growth. Verse 16, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before the great. There's an interesting dichotomy here in Proverbs, because we see several times about the evil man's bribe and how much damage that can do and how dishonest and evil that is. But then we also see several times in Proverbs how an honest man's gift can make room for him in this case, or bring him before the great. Basically, put him in front of people who he needs to be in front of, or in front of people of stature and whatnot. So there's a fine line that we have to ride, and that it says a man's gift makes room for him. It gives him a position, gives him the ability to get in front of people that may need to hear what he says. So we need to be, I think Proverbs is encouraging us to be people who give gifts and who think of others before ourselves, which I think is the real story here. But we need obviously to be careful not to use it as a bribe, not to use it to put ourselves in positions that we shouldn't be in. Verse 17, the one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. So again, we see that Proverbs is kind of this broken up series of statements, and usually there's a one and then the other. So I don't see a whole lot of, later we'll see where a couple of verses are kind of tied together. So we don't necessarily see that here. But anyway, it's talking about kind of in a court of law or in a situation where, you're hearing both sides of a story. And in the first one seems like it's the correct one, the one that's being honest. Until you hear the cross-examination or you hear the story from the other side. And so, just be careful not to hear one side of any story. I think this is true today in the news. And I see a lot of people kind of isolating themselves to only hearing one side of any story. And I think that's dangerous because it seems right until you see the other side of the story. So we need to always be careful to hear both sides of a story before we make any kind of conclusions, and be careful not to hear one side of the story and assume that they are right. In any case, whether it's politics or even religion, I think the Bible can withstand the criticism of having sought out the other side. So a lot of times you hear in Christian circles, especially in I'm not going to go there. But you hear a lot of times in Christian circles where they say, "Oh no, the Bible is the only way, and that's the only thing you should ever study." But I think the Bible is strong enough that you can seek out other ways, and you can examine and study, and you will come back to find out that the Bible is the truth, and the stories that are in it are true, and that it can withstand the criticism of having been sought out and tested. So anyway, verse 18: the lot puts an end to quarrels and decides between powerful contenders. So I think we've talked about this before, but a lot in this time was kind of like drawing straws. It was not really a game of chance, but it was a way to decide between people or positions or whatever, and so they would do this. They would cast lots, is what it was called. We even see that the soldiers at Jesus' cross cast lots for his clothes, and so it was just kind of a game of chance, in that a decision was just quickly made. And so basically it's saying that puts an end into quarrels, and decides between powerful contenders. And so I looked into some of the commentaries on this, and it talked about how people of position tend to quarrel and fight for who gets whatever position. But I think it makes more sense when you tie it into verse 19. It says, "A brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle." So it's talking about how, casting lot puts an end to a quarrel, and then it goes into how if a brother is offended, he is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle. So that quarreling or arguing between brothers is going to put up walls and divisions among you, and so I think it's saying that if it comes to casting lots to keep from damaging a relationship with a brother, then go for it. If that makes the decision and keeps the relationship from being damaged, then that's better than arguing it out and having someone get offended. Verse 20: "From the fruit of a man's mouth his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of his lips." So that again, and we'll talk about it again in the next verse, but the power of the tongue, the ability to speak to people and be respectful, or just be well versed, be able to have a conversation, that puts, it says in this case, it puts food on the table. And so your ability to do that, your ability to control your tongue, either will get you a job or a position, or will continue your business, or it will cause damage to your business, your job, or your position. So just be careful with your mouth and how powerful it is. We see that again in verse 21. "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." So death and life are in the power of the tongue. It's a very powerful little thing. And we're talking about this in our small group about how much effect on your life and relationships the tongue can have. We see here that death and life are in the power of the tongue. And so we need to be careful, what we say and how we say it to people and what effect it has on them. Verse 22, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. I'll be the first to say amen to that. But he who finds a wife, a companion in life that will love and support and build him up. And I think this is true in both cases. If he who finds a husband, or no, let's not go there. She who finds a husband finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. And so there's a godly and spiritual quality in finding a good mate and being able to build each other up and push each other into a relationship with Christ and deeper into a relationship with Christ, and that's definitely a good thing. Verse 23, the poor use entreaties, but the rich answer roughly. That word entreaties is basically like humble words. Another word is supplications. Basically, I'm trying to get a good definition up here. But anyway, basically, the poor almost have to be humble. They're humbled by their position, and so the poor can't be prideful and be able to get anywhere. They are basically pushed into a humble situation. But the rich tend to answer roughly. They tend to be harsher with their words, and so the commentary I looked up on this kind of said that the poor are almost at an advantage in that they're forced to be humble because of their position, but the rich have this disadvantage in that they can get away with being less humble with their words and using their tongue more harshly. And so we need to be careful in our situations, whether we consider ourselves poor, whether we consider ourselves rich. And I don't know that anyone actually considers themselves rich, but in either case, whether we consider ourselves poor or whether we are actually rich, we need to be careful to keep our speech and everything about us humble and not rough and not damaging to others. Because it goes back to verse 21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and it's a powerful organ, and we need to be careful with how we use it. Verse 24, many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So a man with a lot of friends can still come to ruin. It doesn't keep you from coming to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I think I've always heard this verse kind of analogized or compared to Jesus, and that there's always Jesus who sticks closer than a brother. That is true, but I think it's talking more about a human, another human friend, in that if you build a quality friendship, then they will stick closer than a brother. And so I think it's a comparison here between having a lot of friends and none of them being close. Ruin, there's nothing there to keep you from ruin. But if you have a friend that sticks closer than a brother, that's going to call you out when you're wrong, that's going to keep you from being too prideful, that's going to provide some accountability, that's going to keep you from ruin. It's going to keep you, in good relationship with your family and your friends, and there's friends. There are friends out there that will keep you accountable and will keep you in a better place. And so I think the encouragement here is to find that friend that's going to stick with you through thick and thin, but that's going to challenge you and move you on forward with your relationship with Christ and not into a damaging situation. So that's chapter 18. We'll pick up with chapter 19 tomorrow. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.